No, we need to start speaking Finnish. Is the thing.
I mean, of all the languages that I could learn right now, I think that's definitely low on the list. It would actually make my wife angry because she's been after me to try and pick up a little French because she speaks French.
I always go
Um,
back to the whole. We have the Boston Language Institute, and their science for over 4 decades now has been guaranteed Swahili. That's the best way to do it. Like, what the hell's this language? It sounds pretty funky. Oh yeah, there's also these languages too. But,
not only is it Swahili, it's
it's
guaranteed.
guaranteed, or your money back.
That's
The
hilarious.
best.
Demand for the Galaxy S8 is higher than Samsung's expectations. Will the bigger or smaller Galaxy win the sales war? Apple is rumored to be experiencing production issues for the next iPhone. Might this mean delays for shipping products? And are foreign agents using Stingray cell phone intercepting technology around embassies in Canada? Some scary stuff. These stories and more, so make sure you're charged and ready for episode 247 of the Pocketnow Weekly. Well, this weekly podcast is where we dissect and discuss those gadgets that make our lives mobile. Smartphones, tablets, and wearables. It's all the stuff you wished existed when you were a kid, and a Stingray was just a really cool-looking fish, or the baddest sports car ever made, 1967 L88. It was a monster. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, senior editor at Pocketnow.com, blasting this signal from sunny Southern California, joined as always by plucky podcast producer Jules Wong. How's it going out there on the East Coast,
Well,
buddy
the coolest
boy?
fish these days are the muskie, the taimen, and the walleye, I believe. So definitely get with the times.
The walleye.
Get with the times.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna kick it old school. I like the
You like the
coelacanth.
seal-
You know,
is that
It's,
going to be a Pixel?
I like the
Is
living
that going
fossil.
to be the Pixel 3?
Actually, I would be pretty stuck. I mean, because I'm in such. I've been a lifelong archaeology nerd. That if I were to produce like gadgets on my own, all of my code names would be dinosaurs. You know, for 2022, we're talking code name Deinonychus. You know, like it would be pretty epic.
Well, as far as I can go with, like, that Stegosaurus is pretty much all I got.
Stegosaurus is a great dino, and again, it changed our issues on like endo and ectothermy and what those plates on the back, the spines on the back of the
No.
Stegosaurus might have represented. I'm also a fan of Ankylosaurus,
Okay.
sort of the armadillo with the battle club on its tail, and Coelophysis was one of my favorites. Truden, I don't know if it's Troden or Truden, but one of the evolutionary offspring that might have become a more intelligent example of the
Did they have
Dinosauria.
lips?
Well, no, I mean, like, Stegosaurus had a beak. But most of your carnosaurs had lips.
Okay,
Yeah.
I know. I was
I mean, it was the plant eaters, and especially like a Parasaurolophus. I mean, that had more of like sort of a bony beak. That's the one with the big old crest, the horn, not the horn, the crest that we can assume what it sounded like, sort of a trumpeting sound off the back of
feel
the
like-
skull. That was my daughter's first stuffed dinosaur. She has Perry the Parasaurolophus, so we can say, "Hey, where's your Perry?" and she'll go toddle off and get her Parasaurolophus. Yeah, it's,
So I'm not part of
I
this
think I just lost
podcast
Jules.
anymore. I'll see you guys later.
before I really do turn this into Archaeology Weekly with Nerd Boy McGee, Jules, why don't you let people know how they can get in contact with us for the show while we're still doing our pre-recorded
So yeah,
podcasts?
definitely get in touch with us and make sure that you get your thoughts heard. We have one piece of listener mail this week pertaining to, well, stuff that we can talk about. Otherwise, there was this other
We got a bunch of emails about stuff, but there are things we can't really answer. Like, a lot of people are asking Galaxy S8 questions right now, and until we get like proper hands-on with a review unit, we're sort of just in a holding pattern on our Galaxy S8 coverage.
So until then, podcast at pocketnow.com is the place that you should send all of your questions. Podcast at pocketnow.com.
Right on. You can still tag us on Twitter using the PN Weekly hashtag, but until we figure out our strategy, and unfortunately we can only experiment with our live broadcast capabilities once a week while we're working on how we're going to shift the show back over. We won't be answering those questions in real time during the show, obviously, but you can still hit us up. And we also really appreciate the people that are still sharing that hashtag on Twitter to help promote the show. You guys are rad. And we definitely got a much better response last week with our experimental podcast than I was expecting. So that was
so we had both versions up of the just the audio and then the 360. And how did they perform?
So it sort of split up the audience. I mean, usually a show on YouTube will cover around 10 to 15,000 views. I was really surprised. The 4K 360 degree streaming version of the podcast outperformed the audio version by about 1,000 views. Okay. So people seemed a lot more positive. See, I thought it would be a pain because when we set up for that recording, we were sitting all around the camera. So it was sort of like a really bad, tired, drunken version of like that 70s show, you know, like when they're doing the pan between all the characters.
So like that's one thing that we weren't.
So I mean that's what I mean is like a really poor version of that Diet 70s show. Yeah, exactly.
Just for the taste.
And so I thought you know people would take a look at that and then get really annoyed that anytime someone speaks, you have to move the point of view around. And, you know, for 90 minutes of discussion, I think that's kind of a tall order, but people seemed genuinely positive, mostly positive in responding to that. It definitely brought up one interesting thing that I think 360 cameras could benefit from, which would be better microphone arrays. Because I know Sennheiser has a production-grade microphone, which is spatially aware. Okay. So it can sync with 360-degree video. If we could get something like that built into a 360 camera, then it wouldn't be that difficult to tell a piece of editing software whatever's the loudest audio source, put in a note to automatically pan to that part of the video. And then you could control it if you wanted. If you wanted to look all around, you could. But then you could also say, hey, like go autopilot. And then as people are talking, YouTube could just be sending the video to whoever was doing the talking. I think that could be a really interesting next step for 360 video. But we did put out a little another little sort of video look at the Gear 360 that went up a couple days ago. And I'll be really curious, and something that I'll also extend as the question for this podcast is what kind of content would you guys and gals like to see in our audience for producing 360-degree video? There are already a ton of like, hey, look, I'm at a park. Oh, wow, I'm driving a car kinds of videos on YouTube that you can catch in 360. We're trying to figure out what can we do to tell stories or incorporate this kind of stuff into reviews or, you know, maybe cover more lifestyle stuff. It makes a lot of sense for travel. Like if I were a travel vlogger, this thing would be epic. But when I'm trying to show you a smartphone, it makes a lot less sense if I'm just holding a phone and then there's just this ton of extra video all around me that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about.
You would have multiple review units in sight, and then you would just basically put them as close to the cameras as possible so that they warp, and it's, you know, you don't get a real sense of how the device actually looks and how the software actually looks.
No. It would be sort of the fourth dimensional view. This is the Galaxy S8 as if it were viewed through a tesseract. Okay. And then people could bend their mind around other dimensions in time and space.
I don't want to.
That would be a terrible usage of 4K video streaming.
So no reviews from Pocketnow in 360, basically. That's
well, I don't want to say no, but I want to find stuff that makes sense for how we interact or how we tell a story or how we communicate some of this stuff. And it's kind of the thing, you know, like I forget what video it was, but John Redinger was reviewing a phone and he has this drone shot in one of his videos. And you're like, what? Okay, it's kind of cool that you had a drone, but like right, in like an HD video, you're already only like a sixth or a seventh of the frame holding up a phone which is demonstrably smaller than you are as drones like flying away in your backyard. And I kind of feel like a 360-degree phone review would kind of end up being the same thing. Unless there were something interesting about that device. Maybe it's a rugged device and we're out in like, you know, the middle of the desert or in like the woods or something.
400-foot drop test.
In 360. But that's also why I want to reach out to our audience, because there are other things that we could be doing and talking about technology, mobile technology. Technology is lifestyle, stuff like that, where I feel like 360 could contribute to the conversation, even if it's not our meat and potatoes reviews and benchmarks and all that stuff. So I'll be really curious if people want to drop us some comments, hit us up on the email address, or use that hashtag PN Weekly hashtag on Twitter. What are some ideas that you guys have been wanting to see, or what you think might be lacking from the current 360 videos? And maybe we can help contribute to expanding the portfolio of cool videos that you can watch from your phone or pop into a VR
I don't know
headset.
about you, but I think this is definitely a good chance for like a secondary video channel or sub programming director's commentary or whatnot, in some like that kind of BTS stuff that really like, you know, shows how the sausage is made. So yeah, I mean,
I totally agree. You know what I think could be kind of interesting, Jules, and something that we should maybe even broach with Tony, our editor in chief, is, you know, we were talking a while back. First of all, I brought this up on the Board at Work podcast, but you know, we were also talking about how every single social networking platform sort of has a different vibe. And for YouTube, our vibe is like, you know, really trying to dig into smartphone reviews. I mean, that's really like a majority of what our YouTube channel is covering right now. So why not maybe take a look at something like Facebook for the sort of the Pocketnow lifestyle end, you know, what the editors are up to, the behind the scenes coverage. You know, we've got a video here. I'm explaining what I'm doing, my process. You can check this stuff out. And if you want the full review, you can head over to pocketnow.com, or you can head over to, you know, the Pocketnow YouTube channel. And then I think we should turn Twitter into something like our day, like where Jaime produces the Pocketnow Daily. You know, Twitter's all about like up-to-date information, news, the headlines, the bullet points, get to the point. And I think there could be a fun overlap there where the daily lives on Twitter, the lifestyle BTS stuff lives on Facebook, and then the YouTube core channel is where we produce all of our main content. So maybe something we can take
Android
a look
Authority, feel free to take away our ideas at no cost.
I'll send Josh an email and be like, dude, here you go. If you want to rip us off,
here's the link to the podcast.
We haven't been planning on doing.
Thank you for watching.
And hopefully, and actually, that's kind of a fun point you brought up, Android Authority. I'm hoping to have Josh on the show, not next week, but in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So hopefully, we'll get a guest appearance by Josh Vergara, and if he can,
is it going to come over to your house?
He can actually just join me in the office, right? So that we don't have to do anything funky. It'll be like Jules on the Skype, and then Josh and I in person, and we can do like a nice sit down.
Let me just get on JetBlue and book this flight to Burbank then.
Oh, dude! If only we could approve that for the podcast budget, that would be sick. I would love to do like if we could get that pulled off. We could actually.
I'm just gonna freeload at your house, and it's gonna be horrible.
Dude, I mean, like, we have a comfy couch, man. You would be more than welcome.
Bother Marie and bother Lexi and bother everyone.
Well, I mean, for as much as you might keep her up, she'll keep you up in the middle of the night too. Babies cry loud. But then also, if we could pull that off, I would pack a weekend. I would be like, we're going to do 3-hour sit-down interviews, Joe Rogan podcast style, with every person that I know out here in Southern California. I'd get Rich DeMuro, I'd get Shaka Armstrong, we'd just get them all and just line them all up. And we'd have like 2 months worth of commentary podcasts. So we wouldn't have to
I'm going to talk to you after the podcast, because we've already waffled on for a little bit too long about my my own podcast concept. It's called 1 mile per hour. So I'll talk to you about that afterwards.
Right on.
And in the meantime,
we'll look it up.
Why don't we actually get into the news and stuff and things? And
probably a good idea.
That sounds good. I'm running on like 3 hours of sleep here, and you're having a head cold. So this is a fun time. Anyways, boom, 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 boom. Anyways. Comcast has just filed open its MVO NVNO effort. It's a little carrier thing that's running off of Verizon's network, and it's called Xfinity Mobile. As expected, it's going to be part of its Xfinity internet package, and any subscriber can sign up for it. It's up to 5 lines for free, but what you put on those lines is going to be a little bit. It'll depend on your needs. So you can purchase gigabytes at $12 per, and you have to use them. It's not a prorated thing, so you can't just do
no rollover data, or they won't refund anything that you don't use.
Now, there is also the unlimited access option, with throttling at a relatively low 20 gigabytes. Standard usually is like 22, 23. T-Mobile does it at 30 these days. $65 per line if you're on one of the more basic packages. But if you're with X1, if you have their like triple play and whatnot with all the, oh my god, autonomous TV, smart algorithm stuff, that's $45 per line, and you can basically customize each line to whatever you see fit. Now, they're not going to be using Verizon's network or tolling Verizon's network too terribly, because they are relying on their network of 16 million Wi-Fi hotspots across the nation. Talk and text are free with this, and who knows, maybe...
Okay.
I don't know how Comcast is going to be able to leverage its 600 megahertz winnings, if they have any. We don't know if they have any yet, because of the quiet period that's still in effect. But they do have... decent options in terms of devices. iPhone 7, iPhone 7 Plus, product red as well, so good on them for that. 6S series, SE, Galaxy S8, S8 Plus, S7s, and then the LG X Power, and they have financing.
An odd little LG edition there.
Well, you got to get one device for one Android device.
I would have expected
for that little.
I would have expected, outside of like the Galaxies, that maybe it'd be something like a V20.
No.
I guess the X Power is going to be their entry level product for anyone who doesn't want to drop the cash.
LG was like, oh, who's LG? Yeah. So there's that, and 29 million customers.
Yeah, I mean, really,
29 million possibilities.
Really interesting. Well, that's what I think is sort of dubious about traditional ISPs trying to walk into this space. Is you have a ton of subscribers, but have we built up the trust? Like, do I trust that I want to do business with Comcast under that whole umbrella for both TV, home phone, mobile phone, and all that other stuff? But I think it's interesting that their plans are kind of polar opposites. They've got a plan that's kind of taken a shot at Project Fi, and then they've got a plan which very well complements Verizon's top tier unlimited pricing plan.
This is a plot of convenience. It's a circumstance of convenience for them, because they have existing MVNO agreement that they have yet to activate with Verizon out of a Spectrum trade deal back in 2011. So there's a whole bunch of complications going on with that. But now it's coming online, and there's also just less of a footprint that they need to build out. I mean, they have stores, they have they don't have as wide a portfolio as other carriers do, but they have the big ones, and because they're Comcast, they have the name, so at least these entities know what they're dealing with. Now, in terms of being able to snag all 29 million of them, it's going to be
probably not.
I mean, it's a low cost, it's a low capital expenditure, but it's also low. Like it might produce low yield as well, because you're already telling them to add on $45, $60, $90, $100 to their bill, and you're not exactly
well. And it's also we know consumers are very reticent to engage in that the hassle, the pain of dealing with canceling one service and then firing up another service.
As far as we know, they could have
kind of going hand in hand,
that, but they haven't announced that. Availability is yet to be determined.
Because I'm really surprised they didn't launch this with a Verizon bring your own phone. You know, if you have to, for some reason, buy the phone through Xfinity, like say you just got the Pixel and you think, oh, hey, you know, what would be really cool is if I could, keep all of my bills under one thing. And I already know that I get good Verizon coverage in my area. So piggybacking on the Verizon network would be great. And I've got this phone that's compatible. And to not hear whether or not there's an option for that, I think is kind of a tough first step for one of the most hated brands in the United States.
Yeah, so behind Time Warner Cable, I think, or maybe with Time Warner Cable. But in any case, I mean...
Oh, we're Spectrum now. So now
Spectrum.
Everyone's happy with Spectrum.
Yeah.
We're all on the Spectrum.
Yeah, so...
It's the worst joke I could come up with that.
Colors,
it's terrible.
Things.
I wholly expect that someone will send me angry email about that, because that was a god-awful joke.
Because it's like over here to over here.
Let's. I just think this is fascinating, especially coming on the heels of like we just signed up for YouTube TV.
We can definitely talk about that too, because that's been going on for a while. So, well, it only just rolled out in the 5 major markets. I
mean, we've been hearing about these plans sort of in the process of delivering for a while now. It finally launched, and what was really interesting is last year my wife worked really hard to get us a good cable plan that included Dodgers baseball. You have to have a cable plan to get all of the home games, and it was Vin Scully's last year calling the Dodgers. Well, he's retired now. We're still pretty big Dodgers and Red Sox fans in this household, but we don't need a special cable package for that anymore, just to kind of catch.
Well, that's because it's a bit of a cluster F trying to deal with the licensing, and now the TV station has picked it up too. Yeah. So it's like there's that. But YouTube TV. We didn't talk about it when it first came out back in March, but just to wrap things up here, it's $35 a month for 42 channels. For some reason, there's the regional and New England cable news on there, and one of the pilot markets is not New England, it's not Boston. So great for that. Good job, Comcast. There's no Time Warner channels as well, because of course AT&T wants to keep their hearts to their chest or something. I don't know. Is that a word? Is that a phrase? Yeah. Anyways, it is now. So yeah, but there are the Comcast channels. There are the CBS, the Fox, and all those channels as well. I'm trying to think of other like common carriage companies, but I'm blanking out in my head. So I don't know how this promo is going to work out though, because you have a free month going out right now to, let's see, so that's 18 million. That's like maybe 12 million, 10, 8, and then 7. So we're talking about a cumulative of maybe up to 30 million in population here in these metro areas. And I don't know how that's going to work out in terms of...
Well, because I agree with you. This is kind of a big unknown. And again, we still have that issue with trust, when we're talking about what kind of content we hope to rely on or to subscribe to, or we break down the cost. So what I thought was hilarious is after my wife went through all of that to get Vin Scully's last year at the Dodgers, she signed up for YouTube TV on her own minutes after she found out that it had launched. So we watched YouTube TV last night just to try and get a sense if this is something that we want to try and incorporate into our media streaming habits. And I think she's seriously looking at how we can cut the cord from the cable package that we have now, just go down to maybe basic channels and just pure data. And we're looking at this. We're also looking at just an HD antenna. Maybe that's the right solution for us. And then just trying to do the math on, well, I mean, we've got these 40 channels. We've got some YouTube exclusives. Obviously, we're watching a ton of Hulu and Netflix already. But what about something like HBO?
Yeah.
And if we have to have a separate HBO subscription, then maybe we don't need, maybe we can even cut the cord from YouTube TV, go with an HD antenna, and only buy a couple of the streaming services.
What cords
that we
are
might
you
need
trying
to
to disconnect and connect? And, you know, it's, I mean, really, you know, it's the whole.
And doing the pricing on that has
load.
been a mess.
It's just.
Oh, totally, yeah.
It's just, and the amenities too, like, oh, we have 6 accounts, you can hop on to 6 accounts, and unlimited cloud storage for 9 months per program.
Right. So
yeah, it's everyone's offering a little bit of something else, and for that, it's about emphasizing selection, it's about emphasizing amenities like that. And somewhere along the line, I haven't read about Sling TV, but I'm wondering if there's an equilibrium that we have yet to see. That we have to see.
And a lot of this is just can we sort through all of the overlap too? Because if we end up paying for 2 different types of services, like a Sling and a YouTube TV, we're probably going to be buying redundantly, for some of the content that we're apt to stream. So it's just sorting that all out. But in talking about choices and what choices people are looking for, moving on to some other news. There's a little fly in my office that just keeps dive bombing me. It's like that was actually a much better segue if I had just gotten it out without being distracted by a stupid little fruit fly. No, that demand for the Galaxy S8 is higher than expected, and Samsung is adjusting production. But one of the things I found kind of interesting was currently in the pre-sales, it would seem that the smaller Galaxy is actually leading the pack in sales. That something like, 40%, 45%. Of the phones currently spoken for are the 6.2-inch diagonal variety, and that the 5.8 is making up the rest of that 55% of overall sales. Jules, I was kind of curious. Do you think that that's coming down to pricing, or do you think that people are looking at that screen size, not realizing, the overall form factor, and that maybe they're afraid of a phone that's listed as a 6.2-inch screen?
So my take is that, well, prior to this, we've heard rumors of a 7-3 split in favor of the plus size, all the way back in, before the whole announcement came down. And this was a surprise to me when it's, 6 to 4, or, well, roughly that, in terms of, favoring the S8. So I'm not sure exactly how registrations are going on at Korean carriers and retailers, but as far as worldwide, I'm more kind of I'm not sure how to position myself here, because it's there's Korea, and then
for me, it's I want to be able to say, like, oh, well, obviously smaller phones are preferable because it's the better one-handed experience. Everybody knows that. Phablets are over. Phablets are done. Because I want a good one
thumb. Want to stare at the whole
phone
thing
again,
like it's you're gazing at an amazing infinity display, and I kept saying, oh, how do you make infinity bigger? You put a bigger screen. That's
Well, you can have more infinity. I have heard Neil deGrasse Tyson speak on the subject of some infinities being larger than others. That's again, like, not to turn this into an archaeology and science weekly podcast. You definitely go look up some Neil deGrasse Tyson. He'll explain it far better than I can.
God, we're promoting all the other media at once here, aren't we?
We're going to talk about all the shows on this week's podcast. I'm super grateful. I reached out on Twitter because I was just super in deep on politics podcasts, and all of the folks on
the
Twitter
NPR politics podcast.
Oh,
geez, good job.
Oh, but then also other things too. Like debate shows and Left, Right, and Center and all these other shows. And I was like, I'm just getting angry all the time I'm listening to news. So a whole ton of people came to my aid and recommended a ton of shows that I'm chewing through now. And I really want to thank everybody for helping me out there just to flesh out my podcast.
You know what's
list.
A great podcast that I think you should listen to?
What's
the
that?
Pocketnow Weekly.
Hey, I've heard good things about those hosts. I heard they were dead sexy.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't know how people
But
think I'm.
But getting back to the Galaxy S8, I wonder if this is going to be something that Samsung faces some issues with in describing form factor and rectangular surface area. Because people look at a number like a 6.2-inch diagonal, and I wonder if they're going to be afraid about how big that device really is. Before they get a chance to actually hold one in their hands.
Or even a 5.8-inch
because
diagonal.
I don't think people realize... Well, totally, because I don't think people realize that 5.8-inch screen on the S8 is very close to resembling the amount of surface area from a 5.5-inch 16:9 display. And so trying to communicate that, it's why, like, in the most recent video I did for the P10 Plus, I actually had to put in surface area. So it's like, it's this diagonal, this aspect ratio, and it's actually this much screen, and I put it in centimeters squared. Like, trying to communicate, like, how close or how far these things are when we change the shape of the rectangle, I think is going to be a small, and not like an insurmountable. I don't think this is going to affect Galaxy sales tremendously to any degree. But when people go to shop and they're used to seeing one number represent screen size, and now that number doesn't mean what it used to mean, I wonder if that will affect the sales split between the smaller and the medium-sized Galaxies.
I think the one metric that we're all missing out on is just the width of the screen or the width of the phone, which is always true. It's that the hand grab that you do. So if you're it's I mean, you have the LG G6, as do I. It's a fairly it's just about the same as a 5.1-incher of recent past, and you have the same thing going on with the pretty much with the S7 right there, and it's they're pretty much the same. It's just one's taller now and also has a little bit more screen acreage, and that's the G6. So sometimes math can do magic, and I can see myself in my face. In the freaking...
Well, and you saw I was trying to do the trig and the algebra so I could come up with those computations. I have since created an Excel spreadsheet where I can just plug in the numbers, but it was still like, oh man, now I have to like do that thing that teachers said I'd have to do, where solving for X actually became something that was helpful.
On Pocketnow this week, how to do your taxes.
No, but Pocketnow this week, we did learn how to solve for X. Keeping up with Samsung in news stories this week, something that's near and dear to my heart, Samsung joins the HEVC Advance to license out H.265
did this for you.
Technology.
This was a special for you. So...
Well, and especially because, if you guys have been following my personal Twitter account and some of the other conversations we've had on the podcast, I am a big fan. My position on cameras is I really feel if you're trying to save memories, if you're shooting important moments in your life, you should be shooting 4K. And a lot of people will complain, well, that eats up too much storage, or it's hard to upload to cloud storage because of bandwidth issues. And so the solution to that is to use smarter compression, which is H.265 or HEVC. If you pick up a Huawei phone or an Axon 7, when you shoot 4K, you're shooting much smaller file sizes for significantly better video quality. So the video quality of a Mate 9, I would say, is very close to like an iPhone 7 UHD video, but the file sizes are drastically, like almost 30% smaller than the iPhone file sizes. So if Samsung were to get on board this trend and give you HEVC for the Galaxy S8, that could be a tremendous shot in the arm for getting more companies like Google to properly support this. Because the big stumbling block is that Google and YouTube do not properly support HEVC. And I think that's very irresponsible that they won't even back up the video files. So, like Google Photos, every time you take a photo or a video, it's going to back up to your Google Photo account. Google does not alert you to the fact that it will not back up HEVC. This is not a problem with Huawei. This is a problem with Google not delivering on what they said they would, because they're in a licensing dispute over how much HEVC costs to license. So if Samsung makes this move, I think this will put a tremendous amount of pressure on Google to get with the times. And this is a huge benefit to a number of people around the world who have to deal with phones' limited storage, or the amount of money it costs to keep a cell phone data plan up, and you want to be able to back up those videos, but cloud storage is expensive, or your data rates are expensive.
Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of background legal stuff that we could go into, but I'm not even sure if the S8. I mean, the S8 does play back HEVC. I'm not sure if it records HEVC.
Right.
We have to check on. Hopefully, we can get a unit for that.
I'll have to look it up. I could have sworn that HEVC started getting support with the Qualcomm 810, but someone's going to have to correct me.
I mean, it could be
for playback.
It
not
could
for
be
encoding.
turn on, turn off for encoding, if that could be.
That's true too.
But in the case of Google, I mean, they do have cloud to think about. They do have lots of copies and whatnot. It's a different ball game if you're creating or if you're dealing with packaging files. Whereas Google, they're sort of left, having to not only, do that, but do it for YouTube and do it for a whole bunch of their entities. So I kind of understand that
that's true.
There's a little bit more contention and a little bit more support towards an open source standard like VP9.
Right. Well, and what is their, I think it's AV1,
which is based off
their next generation of VP9, which is supposed to compete against HEVC. And according to people that are using it, that it's on track to be a very healthy competitor to HEVC. The problem is we have HEVC now. Like, we can use it now. And what I think is interesting about this story is that Samsung
of video codecs.
Yeah, right. Well, and like other people have been bringing up, like, is this VHS versus beta all over again? And I don't think it's going to be that brutal a fight. It's just that we have a solution and we have hardware that's capable of this now. And what I think is interesting is Samsung was actually way ahead of the curve on HEVC. It's not been on their phones, but if we remember their camera division, the NX1 used HEVC to great effect. Before we had, class 3 memory cards, you could shoot cinema 4K or UHD at 30 frames per second or 1080p at 120 frames per second at a super high bit rate because it was being encoded in HEVC. So the thing that has been frustrating me about Google's position on this is, yes, HEVC will be more expensive to license than if they have some kind of open source solution, but already we are running into those problems with bandwidth. Streaming 4K 360-degree video, we've got a lot of people complaining on some of the samples that we've put up that when you go full resolution, playback is super choppy. One of the things that would help is if the amount of info being shoved through that pipe were minimized. And so Samsung is actually using HEVC to capture the raw video on the Gear 360, and then it's being converted to a larger file size so that you can upload it to YouTube, or you can, save it in Google Photos or share it in Google Plus. And it's just so inefficient. If we could just stick with HEVC, that would actually, it would mean more processing power, but processing power isn't the problem. When a 2-year-old flagship phone has enough horsepower to handle this stuff, maybe some PCs out there with just dedicated graphics are going to struggle a bit, but we could be further along now. And I wonder if that bandwidth streaming would offset the costs of licensing HEVC. YouTube is storing less data and streaming less data. Eventually, I think that would kind of balance out higher licensing costs. Of course, I don't have any idea what Google's rate sheet for that kind of stuff is, but there are benefits for Google here too, to start getting on board better video compression. And if they want, if they think AV1 is the way to go, get it in a Pixel. Give us a beta app. Do something, because this problem is only going to get worse over time for everyone involved. we could be working on solutions today. So kudos to Samsung. If the Galaxy S8 supports HEVC, I'm going to be very
until
excited
they make a cross
feature.
codec for AV1 and HEVC, because that's what this license in and out.
Samsung's just dying to do a Sony there. You know that there's like this is the Bixby 3 video codec. That's what we want to do. Completely proprietary. It'll only play on Galaxy tablets.
Man.
That's it. That's all you get.
That's what the licensing in and out allows them to do. So good luck with that. Anyways, let's talk about some
Speaking of good luck with that.
Good news finally for BlackBerry as I try and move up the counter here. So yeah, it's amazing that we haven't been able to talk about profits for them in a long time. We've seen a decade of decline. That the iPhone, of course, is the roux of the day for John Chen, and nowadays less so. I mean, bankers have been asking BlackBerry to basically just drop their hardware for the longest time, and they've been able to find an equilibrium by partnering up with manufacturers for ODM deals.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, Royal Bank of Canada's Paul Trieber wrote that the risks with BlackBerry's turnaround appear to have diminished. The company is no longer dependent on service access fees, related cash flow, and the liability from hardware has been largely eliminated. So they've upped their ratings for investment on their stock and company, and now all we have to do, like John Chen and himself during the earnings call this week or last week, said that they'll project a profit in this fiscal year, I think. So turnaround?
That's really impressive. And I guess it's one of the things we didn't take into account when we heard of these partnerships, that there probably is a licensing component happening from TCL's side. I mean, money is probably moving back and forth in ways that we weren't really anticipating from a hardware deal like this. And without the overhead and the costs associated, yeah, that puts BlackBerry in a much better position as a software and a solutions company, especially for the corporate sector, and then offloading the things that were sort of dragging their business down. I'm really hoping we're supposed to be getting a key one to play with soon. So hopefully we can start adding that to the list of phones that we're going to be producing coverage on. But I'm very positive on this move. I've been a big fan of TCL. I really like, starting with the Idol 3. I think they've been executing some really, really competitive hardware. And now having a BlackBerry brand in their portfolio, I'm hoping that this will start giving them a bit more visibility for consumers.
And if anything, the high street thinks that, consumer is disposable anyway, so, they can just lop off the whole thing altogether and no harm done. I mean, we're already talking about a month's delay in shipments from TCL with the key ones, so a little bit of disappointment to come ahead. But on the other hand, we also heard that BlackBerry is also ready and willing to license out its name for other things like tablets, more phones, smartwatches, even medical devices as well. So definitely looking at the BlackBerry as a name is there's still some value to it, apparently.
Oh, I think tremendously.
Well, in terms of security,
I mean, some smart partnerships.
It's a big security name. It's a big enterprise name, but it still doesn't make sense for me. Maybe in terms of consumer and
No, totally true, and probably not a heavy player if they were to suddenly just start licensing out to like Acer to make tablet PCs or something like that. But the idea of the BlackBerry name in medical, I think, has a lot of merit. Where you want that notion of data security, of privacy, of keeping that stuff locked down. And if they were to engage with smart partners for some of that kind of some of that kind of production.
It's been crazy how much how many ransomware attacks have happened on these facilities. So if anything can be done, BlackBerry might be able to do it with their hardened boots chain or whatever.
I think medical is an area where people want more sort of validation or more security or and it's a name that's already sort of been utilized in the medical space for a while. I still see doctors walking around with BlackBerries, and old school BlackBerries at that. So I think that's an opportunity they definitely shouldn't overlook. I think that's a humongous potential if they were to expand their portfolio there with strategic partnerships with durable medical equipment.
Then again, we could just stop judging people for whatever medical conditions they have, and also accept people with pre-existing conditions onto insurance.
Oh, Jules. If only. I mean, we can now turn the Pocketnow Weekly into a political podcast.
Yeah, I can make you mad this way as well.
So what, like I said, we've got Pocketnow Archaeology, Pocketnow Science, Pocketnow Math, and Pocketnow Politics.
Man, we're just expanding all these places. I do have a story to go back to since I skipped over it in our rundown, but
no worries.
We'll get to that. We'll get to Ottawa and the spies that are defiling it.
Well, all of these kind of go hand in hand. So it's okay that we're moving the schedule around because we're talking about security, we're talking about consumer privacy, things like that. Because I think I know what story you're going back to. And this is one issue that I think Samsung needs to get out ahead of, considering their big leverage for the Android ecosystem is that at any point they could go off and make their own phones using Tizen. Their smartwatches use Tizen. And now we're getting reports that Tizen might not be the most secure platform for those of you looking at how to protect your data, how to protect your content. Jules, talk us through this a little bit, because this is coming from Motherboard,
yeah, this is
right? That they did
a little interview piece with Amihai Neiderman, who is head of research at Equus Software in Israel, and he's been pouring over through the code of Tizen, which Samsung was already under some fire after WikiLeaks report last month detailed how the CIA was able to hack into Tizen-powered smart TVs and be able, they're able to spy on users through the cameras on them. So it's kind of people are already on guard from that. And with the creeping in of Tizen into entry-level devices in Africa, Russia, of course, you want to make the point about, Putin and all that.
Yeah.
But in any case, Niederman calls it the worst code. It may be the worst code I've ever seen, Tizen. Everything you can do wrong there, they do it. You can see that nobody with any understanding of security looked at this code or wrote it. It's like taking an undergraduate and letting him program your software. 40 vulnerabilities, wow. Most of them found in code that was newly written. Most of the base code was taken from Bada, which is one of Samsung's smartphone operating systems back in the late 2000s. And there's also encryption, there's spotty encryption. SSL is only on some transmissions, but not the critical ones that.
Yeah, that one took me by surprise that there seemed to be differing criteria for which pieces of information would be encrypted and which pieces of information wouldn't be, especially with so many of these vulnerabilities allowing for remote code execution, where people can not only get into devices, but they can
inject code right there and boom.
They can inject code, which then they can operate. Again, we were talking a while back when the East Coast data centers were going down because of denial of service attacks, and those denial of service attacks were coming from smart appliances, from Internet of Things, that we need to get more serious about making sure that those devices, those gadgets are
with the 5G backhaul and cellular streetlights.
Right. Well, but that, when we start putting more smart things in our home, Samsung was talking about the Galaxy ecosystem. So you could pull up on your phone that you could look inside your fridge and see what things you needed while you were out shopping, things like that. If Tizen isn't any better secured than some of these other IoT platforms, then it's going to create a lot of headaches. And maybe individual users won't be directly affected. But if you have remote code exploits, then that means that someone can get into your fridge, turn that into another zombie attacker and another one of these denial of service attacks. And it might not directly affect you, but then all of a sudden Netflix goes down on the East Coast, or Amazon goes down on the
and then
East
your
Coast.
meat's all
And we have
spoiled, and the milk goes crazy bad.
and just to screw with you, they turn the fridge down super cold so your milk freezes. Mustache twirl.
Oh, geez.
I guess maybe.
Robbie
but
Rotten.
you know, in the grand scheme of things, businesses, I think, need to be very concerned about data infrastructures. So when we see these types of exploits, you know, banking institutions maybe need to put a little bit of pressure on Netflix. Not Netflix, on Samsung. Government installations need to have some frank sit-down conversations with Samsung about how they can better secure these products and lock them down. And just as consumers, even if our direct data isn't compromised, the fact that someone could use a product on our home network to engage in an attack on another installation needs to be something we're aware of.
And you know, Samsung has been kind of reticent in addressing the issues because attempts were made to contact Samsung by Naderman and then by Motherboard, and it only took until the article was published and it was, we're fully committed to cooperating with this guy, and we also have a bug bounty program for TVs, which, you know, is addressing part of the problem, but they, you know, Tizen's on smartphones, it's on smartwatches, it's on everything else, so you might want to deal with everything as opposed to just one thing.
Right. Well, and I'd be also curious to see, you know, like if there were a white hat hacker out there who had better information on this, what the difference in exploits would be comparing a Samsung TV, which, you know, if it's using Tizen, against something like LG Solution using WebOS. You know, we're talking about a code base that went through numerous iterations from Palm to HP to then being open sourced. And I wonder if that provides any better security, or if it's security through a smaller user base that maybe
obscurity.
There's more Tizen. Security through obscurity. Thank you. I couldn't remember that phrase. That there are just way more Tizen products out there than WebOS products, and maybe that's why we don't hear about the same issues with LG TVs that we hear with Samsung TVs. I'd be really curious to see what the potential numbers on that are.
More of the other products than WebOS products. Where have I heard that before? Again and again and again.
And again and again. But in talking about security, getting back to our list of topics here and links from Pocketnow.com.
It's a great site.
We have, you know, I've heard that it's an excellent resource for people who are interested in mobile technology.
It's the best. You should definitely. You won't believe it.
The best. You won't. And we just have like a new ad program too, so you can even customize the ads that are on the site. So you should check that out. But getting back to our list of topics, and again, sticking with security as a theme, this is a story that kind of rocked my world a little bit. And one that I don't think got a lot of traction in the news cycle is that we're seeing reports in Canada. Where is it? In Ottawa, right?
The capital.
That there are reports of stingray activity. Now, stingray is that mini mobile cell phone tower spoof where people can use this to connect to a phone and potentially hijack and intercept communications and information going through the stingray system. And it seems to be deployed around government installations, defense headquarters, and a number of embassies in the area, but not through the Canadian government. That we think that this is early days for this story. The story is not fully confirmed. We're still trying to figure out exactly what's going on, but that this could be the doings of foreign agents trying to intercept and catch this data. And actually, one of those things I'm actually kind of surprised that we haven't been hearing more about this. Once stingrays were sort of unveiled to the public, that I thought we'd be seeing a lot more foreign operatives trying to utilize this kind of tech. It seems they
have before,
and it seems they're aggressively using it in Canada.
They have before. At least one security expert that the CBC Radio Canada talked to was able to track down Russian operatives using IMSI catchers for previous operations. They would be able to tell who were policed just by the cell phones not moving around for 8 hours a day nearby the police station or whatnot. So there's definitely lots of finger pointing going on at this point. The Communication Security Establishment, which is basically the Canada's DIA, said it's barred by law from doing that work. Russian embassy rejects allegations. Chinese embassy thinks it's ridiculous to point the finger at them. Israeli embassy has no knowledge of the issue, and the U.S. Declined to comment. So anything that we can trace back, or publicly, no one's really pointing it, but it's happening.
And so,
the thing is that
we knew that that governments were using this. Like, we know that this has been an active system in operation in the United States. That the Canadian Mounted Police have used stingrays. We covered this story a while back about BlackBerry devices being unencrypted to follow like New York mobster connections. What I'm kind of surprised is that this technology hasn't fallen into the hands more actively for the sort of espionage side of this, not just for governments conducting investigations on their own soil, but then sending this technology overseas to other locations. Well, we're assuming that this is probably happening in Canada.
It's called espionage for a reason,
Right, we're not really supposed to know about it, but I'm surprised that more of this hasn't been uncovered. So this seems to be a pretty big find in Canada that a foreign operative is utilizing and deploying this technology. I'm just surprised that we haven't been uncovering more of this kind of activity over time.
Well, and people don't. I mean, there's this certain phones that are out there that can track this sort of stuff, but you have to have the right kind of credentials to get them, and it's all kind of a crapshoot just to find this stuff out. And it takes investment to do that, and Pocketnow, or maybe our Joe Levi can get a cryptophone, test things out, see who's spying on who.
Well, we are looking at trying to get Joe on more often, especially to talk about security related stuff. So I'd be curious to hear his thoughts on this. But just it was a story that kind of shocked me a little, and one that we will be following up on as more information is.
So security, right? Oh man, it's one of those safety net things. And speaking of safety nets, Leco does not have much of a safety net.
Does not have anything left as a safety net, apparently.
Not apparently.
This has been a scary implosion to watch, because we keep talking about what would elevate a brand. We want to see companies doing bold things, exciting things. We want to see them getting out there and trying to get their products into people's hands. Can you build a new lifestyle brand from scratch? And this was a company that was exciting to talk about in terms of pushing the envelope on how quickly and how aggressively they could try and make these deals happen. And now it seems that we're seeing the whole infrastructure of the company kind of implode around that aggressive marketing, aggressive sales.
Just to wrap through the whole situations, Echo started out as LeTV, a digital entertainment company in China, and they decided to expand into smartphones only about 2015. They did so in Asia first, and then late in 16, around 16, they went into India and then the U.S. They had a whole bunch of news releases about, we bought land in California. We bought the former Yahoo headquarters
and in San Francisco. Like that was
Santa Clara, but it's still
it's that whole area. I guess it's still pretty pricey.
In hindsight, should you have bought like the former land of bygone Yahoo? That doesn't really bode well. But in any case, once they did make their launch, news started spreading of, we don't have enough money investors have been criticizing the company for spending money as it has on these expansions, and they've been doing it pretty aggressively with big discounts on their TVs and whatnot. And also the future, Faraday Future, their autonomous car project, they are planning on building a factory in Nevada for that, And at this point, their stock is getting hit. A margin call was made, so you had to pile on more money or else, and they had to ask for a $2.2 billion funding round from a property firm in China, and even with that, Bloomberg.
This is the scary bit.
Bloomberg tells us that that one of the checks, the recent check for the end of March, had to be delayed until April 4. And employees were told that there were problems moving money from China to the U.S. And there's just been this whole internal falling out, too, where high-end executives in the U.S. have moved away from Leica, some of them to Samsung, because of the chairman.
Because they're not paying.
Well,
they're
it's not
paying
even
their
that.
employees.
It's not. I mean, there's that too. There's the money part, and there's the whole, But it's also these executives are not allowed to make decisions for their own market. We saw, Chairman Jia Ting. He's a very grandiose vision kind of guy. We saw that at the launch show that they held in San Francisco, and he's a very eccentric personality. He once told investors that they would reach market capitalization of $100 billion and had to be disciplined by the Shenzhen Stock Exchange.
And disciplined is exactly the right word to use
for
there, totally.
Juicing investors to get the share price up to a certain level. So we have IOUs from suppliers going out. We have the sale of its Santa Clara, California headquarters. Their acquisition of Vizio, the TV maker from California, that has hit a stone wall with the Chinese government because of their tightening restrictions on currency outflows. So now they may just partner up or do a minority stake. And this, the Faraday Future, their factory has stopped progress on its, their construction. And the turnover at the financing division has just been kind of, especially while Jia keeps telling people
this is miserable news
to keep spending.
Yeah.
So there's a question of what kind of leadership we're dealing with here, and where the buck stops, and if people are just not putting up with it anymore.
Yeah, it's been a tragic story to follow because a lot of this is hinged. Like, can you create a lifestyle brand from scratch? And I still have to believe that, you could, but if Echo is any indication, it takes a substantial amount of forcing the issue with lots of money and losing a lot of that money over a long period of time for you to actually execute this kind of vision, which I don't think anyone has the stomach for in this market.
Especially because everything was done in a short period of time where it requires lots more upfront investment. Jia was always about that. He's he's been driving this ship down into into the apostles. So.
Well, I still kind of hope that Echo finds their way, because I think any company that's looking to be some kind of market disruptor is something I still want to talk about. It's just, it takes some time to build a brand or to build a piece of a brand, let alone an entire lifestyle company. But in talking about things falling apart, Google has a program to try and build some bridges, to try and create some alliances, or at least broker some peace deals between different Android OEMs. And that's Google's PAX, a PAX license, which would be sort of a patent peace deal between different companies. And a way to sort of share intellectual property between different manufacturers.
So basically the first patent convention is going to be in Seattle, and then it's going to spread over to Boston and then over to San Antonio. There's going to be branch events all over the world, and if you're not you should probably get your weekend passes for PAX right now while they're still cheap. Anyways, so yeah, it's a PAX license. 9 manufacturers are on board with it: Google, Samsung, LG, Foxconn, and HMD, which both together represent Nokia. So, well, Foxconn also does a whole bunch of other deals as an ODM. HTC, Coolpad, BQ, and Allview. Coolpad, by the way, Chairman Jirateng of Leica also has a hand in, so it's kind of interesting. Licensing terms are confidential, but they're able to license royalty free between the companies whatever Android innovations that they have, Google related Android innovations. So if you're not dealing with the AOSP, then you're dealing with Google, and it sounds like a pretty good idea. You have 230,000 patents to work off of. I mean, what's not to love?
Well, and then also I like this notion of Google trying to promote a healthy environment of competition. It would serve Samsung for all of these other competitors to go away. So, like for one individual company, I'm sure they're looking at that. But, for an ecosystem to thrive, having more competition in the space is going to be better. And it's
Google's ecosystem and not Samsung's, which is why Google Assistant has popped up on my G6. So whatever. But in any case, the Korean Fair Trade Commission is, investigating whether Google has interfered with Samsung's efforts to develop Tizen. So it's kind of, there's the give and take there. There's the competitiveness and the anti-competitiveness in this. It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and especially for something, in kind of circling back to Tizen very briefly, there is something really interesting about that idea of where do you draw the line between aggressive competitive business and anti-competitive business. And I'm sure different municipalities, different locales in different countries have very different outlooks on how their laws are enforced for anti-competitive business, especially when we're talking about the Korean Fair Trade Commission and Samsung is sort of home turf for them and Google is the outside interloper in regards to that kind of
and next
that kind
week
of a
on the
action.
Pocketnow Weekly, we invite on FCC Chairman Ajit Pai.
Yeah, excellent. We'll do Pocketnow Business. Excellent. We've created 7 new podcasts.
Why do you hate
I'm
network
very excited
neutrality?
about the expansion of our brand. It's because you're in for a conversation of substance when you lead questions off.
What is this uncertainty?
Why do
what is this
you hate
uncertainty
consumer
you're talking
freedom and
about?
choice?
What is this confusion that you're talking about? Because as consumers, we're not really confused, and businesses aren't really confused about it. In fact, they know they have to just work harder. That's all. They know about it.
Totally. I mean, if they wanted to succeed, then they would. The problem is they're just
financially,
not
it's not confusing or uncertain. They're going to have to take a hit. And they're going to work harder, and then eventually they might be able to make that revenue back. So, anyways, let's talk about something that's beyond
moving right
us.
along, because we do have a phone to talk about.
Yeah, we have one phone to talk about, finally.
Well, you have a couple phones to talk about. It's just kind of interesting. This quick little news blip, a phone that probably should be getting a little bit more attention. Like I was saying, I've been a fan of Alcatel's.
So you remember the LG
their own
LG V10? And it had 2
I do remember
front-facing cameras. Like, it was this crazy thing.
And you remember the G5 and the V20 and the G6, how they have 2 rear-facing cameras?
Well, guess what? The Alcatel Flash has 2 rear and 2 front-facing cameras.
No way. Get
and it's
out.
only costing, I don't know how much, but it's supposedly going for pretty cheap because...
Yeah, this is the Helio X10 processor, 3100 milliamp hour battery. The X20, sorry, the 10 core. Yeah,
you got to get the 10 core.
5.5 inch HD screen, 3 gigabytes of RAM, 32 gigabytes of storage, and gigabytes of storage. That's going to be a new one for me. Gigabytes.
I love taking them
and
out.
Android Marshmallow, Android 6.0. Alcatel, I think, plays very competitively in this space. And their cameras aren't terrible, and so going dual camera front and back, I think, could be kind of a fun little hook for an entry level or lower tier mid ranger. That could be pretty exciting. If this were Idol 3 territory, then I think they've got something interesting.
I don't know about you, but I love the Queen's Queen song "By Giggle."
Bye, Giggle.
Giggle.
Bye, Giggle.
Bye,
Bye, Giggle. That's as much as we can sing before we get hit with a
because of
copyright
course
strike
YouTube
right
is
there.
going to be able to do that. And apparently I have been signed out of Google. So great. Now at this point in the show, if we were still on Hangouts, I would have been kicked out of this chat. But since we're not on Hangouts,
That's true.
we can continue.
Since we're not in Hangouts, we can go right to the next news story, which is about another phone, which I don't think will be nearly as well received as Alcatel's quad camera shooter. I don't get
it
this
either. This
phone
this
at all.
made the headline somehow, and I was like, okay,
This is like one of the most viewed stories of the week, and how did that happen?
I don't know how desperate people are to see like an actual Windows 10 mobile phone succeed, but apparently the cerulean moment is having its moments, and
well, it's moment on Indiegogo. Also, we're talking about another crowdfunding thing, which, man.
Yeah,
this is if your business strategy is hinging on getting people to pay for products up front. Like for example, I've sponsored a battery which was supposed to be able to charge a laptop, and I funded that project was funded. When was it? I want to say it was November of last year, and I was hoping I would have it in time for MWC, and the thing still hasn't shipped. So, you know, I'm kind of over companies that hinge their distribution and their production strategy on crowdfunding. Well, I want companies that have a business model which can actually produce gear and get it into my hands in a timely fashion.
It's like the whole Indiegogo, like the entity itself is kind of weird and shoddily produced, because we got the video editing on this intro video that's kind of like, it's kind of amateurish, and
and isn't that what's so funny about crowdfunding though? Because if your video's too slick, then people assume that you've got more money. Why don't you just put that money, instead of making slick videos, you could put that money towards making your product?
Oh my god, this vaporware.
So you've got to play this ridiculous game of crowdfunding something that looks just professional enough, but not too professional, because you want people to feel like you're some kind of underdog and that you're not already super slick. But anyway, this is the cerulean moment, which is a terrible name for a product. Cerulean moment.
See if this gets you
instantly
hot, because I know that Windows Phone fans can also have a very big intersect.
Of which I am a Windows Phone fan. I have my 950 back out because of the most recent update to
very
Windows 10
big
Mobile
intersect with spec heads. So we're talking about Snapdragon 617, 5-inch, 720p display, and 2 gigs of RAM, I think. Ugh. In any case, and are you willing to pay the discounted price of $290 out of a SRP of $299?
No, this is what's hilarious. So if you're a backer, you will only pay $290 for this phone, a savings of $9 whole dollars off of the retail price. This is ridiculous. Jules, it hurts my soul so much. I mean, what are the other things they're talking about?
A 1.1
a 13 megapixel rear camera, 32 gigabytes of storage. That's actually not terrible, and it does have an SD card slot, but a 2200 milliamp hour battery with that last generation mid-ranger Qualcomm chipset. It just, like, at $300, we're in like Honor 6X territory, where everything about the Honor 6X absolutely demolishes this phone, and it's a real product. You can go out and buy it today. The only thing is, obviously it's not a Windows a Windows phone. I don't know, man. This thing just hurts my head that someone's trying to position it. It's got full support for T-Mobile bands, but only partial support for AT&T's network. This is a non-starter, and it's frustrating, because I want to see any kind of activity in the Windows mobile space. I really do feel the market benefits from some kind of plucky third place competitor, but without Microsoft showing any real visible support for the platform, it's kind of a non-starter. So at $300, it's got a month left for funding this project. They expect they need 1.1 million
or 3,900
to get this thing off the ground.
So
around 3,900 units, and right now it's at 2% of its goal with 88 backers, and even I think even that's high.
Yeah,
I think even that's more support than I think this thing should really warrant. But when you look at, like if you wanted a killer Windows phone and you didn't want to get a Lumia 950, you've got the HP out there, you've got the Idol, again, taking it back to TCL. There's a solution for you to get your Windows phone fix from a reputable, established company that will probably do a better job of supporting these, not only supporting them, but actually manufacturing them and getting them out in your hands. Because once this thing's funded, that doesn't mean that the phone is just going to ship to you. It's just been funded. So by the time this thing ships, it's going to take even longer to get this phone in your hands. These specs will be even more out of date by the time this thing arrives on your doorstep. I'm just shocked. I'm shocked that this has been getting as much attention as.
On the other hand, I'm loving this header image featuring the phone next to a menu for Misto in Manchester, Connecticut, and I'm pretty hungry at this point. It looks pretty good. I'm especially loving the char-grilled steak and cheese for $12.95.
I could go for some food of some kind, food of the eating variety. And that's going to be, what, the 9th Pocketnow podcast? Is Pocketnow Cuisine? We'll do that.
Basically all the food we can stuff in our pockets.
I really should have spent more time. All the food you can just stuff in your pockets.
That you wished for when you were a kid.
Sponsored by Blue Apron. I really liked the Blue Apron service, and I hope they sponsor us again in the future because I liked working with them. They were fun.
Well, I mean, the codes are yours if you want them because I still can't cook.
Oh, that's right. We still did have those codes out there. Let me see if those work because I enjoy it. So my wife doesn't like cooking, and she liked Blue Apron. So that'll be the little mini plug. They're not sponsoring.
We're not
this
getting
show,
the money from this episode.
We're not getting any money from me talking about Blue Apron right now, but I really did enjoy that service. So again, fingers crossed that they like us in return. But
you want to banter some more?
We should. Yeah. Well, we have the next story. Isn't it kind of bantery anyway?
You've talked about your April Fool's tendencies because as much as
I'm a big fan. I like the April Fools.
You do.
I do. I really do. I like April Fools because I feel there's something about everyone knowing that terrible jokes are coming, that there's an opportunity to do a terrible joke really well. And I'm a big fan of dad jokes, like cornball humor when done intelligently, I think rises to an art form. I think you can take a look at a comic like an Andy Kaufman and performance art is just incredible. Or you can take a look at like Adult Swim's infomercial block where comedy comes from conflict and creating unsettling media. And I routinely kind of find myself digging back through videos like unedited footage of a bear or Too Many Cooks. And there's just something so brilliant about doing something subversive or unsettling or purposely corny that I think April Fools, more often than not, those jokes fail miserably, but then a gem pops up. And I think we find a piece of media to celebrate. So this story actually tracked really well on Pocketnow.com.
Yeah, have you been able to
the Google Translate bubble wrap?
Have you been able to actually watch it? Because I think we'll be able to insert a clip here, and then we'll end. So, do you want to? Have you been able to watch the thing?
No? Actually, no. I mean, like I kind of fired it up, but we can go ahead and.
So here it is.
Because it's 90 seconds.
No. Okay. I'm kidding. All right, I'll watch it too because I need a refresher on this.
Oh, it'd help if I had the closed captioning on.
The Japanese are great at this stuff. Yeah. Mm.
That's awesome. So yeah, it's. Oh, you're still streaming.
Yeah, no,
okay,
yeah.
I was just
No,
a little ahead of you there.
Yeah.
But it's you come up with something corny. So this is a corny premise. Like, what if we made a keyboard out of bubble wrap? But then it's the commitment to the bit.
Yeah.
So it's the little things like, not only can we make this keyboard, but we can also infuse it with the air of Hawaii. You know, in that lifestyle way that we try and talk about technology
lifestyle
products.
way that you can only get.
Totally. Oh, it's so funny. It's so well considered. Or for another future model, we're going to infuse it with helium, so the keyboard is literally lighter.
But you can't use it on planes though, because this is actually reading the air pressure inside, and you wouldn't want that changing on you. Guess what? You can actually get to the GitHub repository for this project and actually make this,
contribute to it.
Yeah. So it's up to you. So, you can definitely do it.
Yeah, I think Google, it's whether or not you not only just deliver something wacky, but then you also commit to the bit. So past April Fool's Days, and every April Fool's Day for the foreseeable future, I'm going to keep calling back to the YouTube Awards. I think this was 3 years ago that they did this April Fool's joke where for an entire day, they streamed the nominated titles for the YouTube Awards, because every video on YouTube was nominated for a YouTube Award. And they had 2 hosts and presenters. I mean, like, that
it stood
was
there for
such
9
a
hours
labor
or something
of love. It was. They stood for 9 hours, and they would take these short breaks with these pre-recorded segments and then go right back to, with a straight face, reading the title and like the first couple sentences of the video description of real videos on YouTube. And so like that to me is an example of, that is a love for the community. Like that is some YouTube love.
I'm wondering
there.
how many,
and then also that is intense commitment.
I'm wondering
to the bit.
How many tag clouds they hit in their journey.
I mean, like trying to leverage. I mean, I would love to have been in the room where they pitched that idea. You're like, oh yeah, the YouTube award. So we'll read off like 20 video names, and it'll be a fun gag. And you're like, no. We're going to broadcast all day. All day. And we're going to hire 2 presenters, and all day we will name YouTube videos.
It'll be like Mega Yam Review, Scratch and Bend Test, Are Sweet Potatoes Worth It? Yams Explained. And the description is, this video is lit.
So, well, thank you for plugging the Some Gadget Guy April Fool's Day joke. That was also
very tasteful.
I had fun putting that together. It's a 17-minute review of a yam. So you really get in there, and we talk about the pros and cons of yams. And there's a special guest appearance by the YouTuber who does all of those really crazy gadget destruction videos. Barry Racks Every Tech. So he was kind enough to join me in doing a proper scratch test with hardened picks, so you can see the pick hardness, how the yam survives that, and he also helped me with the teardown, so we could see what was actually.
I love
the
Barry's
yam.
baritone. It was definitely a soothing experience.
Oh yeah, no, I mean he really records himself in an interesting way, because he's like really on top of the microphone, so you can hear just the nuances of his voice as he's communicating this gadget destruction porn. So it was I was really glad to have him on, because I think he lended some very interesting insights, especially like when we're talking like burn tests and bend tests. You don't want a piece of produce to end up on the cubby of crap construction. You really want to make sure it doesn't end up on that shelf of shame.
I mean, I'd rather have it end up on the upper rack of my broiler, preheated, and everything, and then it's a little marshmallow action going on. Like,
yeah. So I know, April Fool's Day gets a bad rap, but and it deservedly, because like I said, most April Fool's Day videos are losing situations. So like, most
instead of a bad rap, you want to put some
but...
tinfoil on that, because you don't want that plastic
and then broil that puppy
burning on the you'd inhale the fumes, and you would lose oxygen, and you would find less and less humor in the April Fool's joke, because
that's very true. Or if the plastic burns in a way with a chemical compound that can affect your mind in some sort of psychotropic way, that could end up being a positive for April Fool's Day.
THC.
Some sort of it's like, if the packaging weren't made out of hemp, for example, but some sort of relative of hemp, then potentially you could do better than that. And we've just created another podcast,
that's going to come in 2 weeks, literally.
The Pocketnow cannabis
14
report,
days from now.
Well, we don't have legal sales quite yet in California, but hopefully that happens soon-ish. I think it's slated for January of 2018. And then I think this podcast is going to get a lot more interesting. Slated to be blazed. And then the tone of the show will probably shift
to memes and puns and all that stuff. It's going to be great.
Totally. And all of our reviews on snack foods. Yeah. So be on the lookout for that. Moving right along on all our ramblings and musings of bad April Fool's jokes. Wanted to wrap up with a trio of stories on Pocketnow.com talking about the iPhone, some more rumors coming out on distribution, manufacturing, and some potential speed bumps for iPhone production coming down the pipe. This could be a very aggressive redesign for the iPhone, so a lot of new tech going into the phone, which is leading to rumors of the phone being ultra expensive, that there could be $1,000 model. But of course, now we also have a bank which is disputing that upper limit on the iPhone 8 being that pricey. But I still think that even their assessment, it's not going to be $1,000, it's going to be a little bit less than $1,000, is still sort of speaking to a culture where the top-end phones, the top-end performers, the Galaxies and the iPhones are commanding $700, $800, potentially $900 price tags. Even if we don't hit that proper $1,000 mark, it's going to be pretty close to it.
Yeah, it's a race to the top, and it's not one that people will be able to follow that closely, especially when 649 is this established its standard. And we're kind of inching our way up until the $40 a month on the 2-year installment plans. It's like, people, there's only so much load that a carrier or a person can take. So, whether this is the tipping point or something else is yet to be seen. And, there's potential that we might not see it on schedule, or at least in the rate that would be desirable, because Apple is apparently there's some delay, that the technical there's some the lamination process of the OLED panels. So Samsung, congratulations on that. You got the job lot. You now have to sit on it. Also, the 3D facial scanning system apparently are the biggest. That's another big concern. And we would be able to guess why the Galaxy S8 used its facial recognition system that doesn't really work to the best of its abilities if it can scan a photo and still recognize your face.
Right.
So there's. It doesn't look good at this point, especially when we're coming closer and closer to showtime, to production, to mass, assembly lines.
Well, and I think one of the issues that's tying up into this story, and I really want to be careful about not letting rumors become actual FUD, fear and uncertainty and doubt, is Apple has been playing hardware so conservatively for the last 2 generations of iPhones. Ever since the 6 changed, delivered 2 different form factors, we've had the 6S and now the 7, which have just been iterative updates for that form factor. Making such a large leap, looking at OLED technology, infinity displays, a fingerprint sensor under the glass of the front screen to get rid of the traditional home button, all of these things are pretty big moves for Apple as a company any one of these hardware features would be a pretty big deal for an iPhone. To deliver all of them in one huge update has got to be a pretty monumental challenge for the engineering talent at Apple, for the team that actually produces the iPhone.
They're kind of they're kind of cornered in that perception where they are the premium brand and the best and whatnot, when the Galaxy S8 Plus has this large screen in a fairly compact body, and
it's going to be months ahead of them for delivering.
You can show them a large screen. You can't show them facial scanning. It's like, oh, it's a cool video effect, but what does this have to do with me? Also, like,
right.
The screen is going to be smaller too, just by that. So, I mean, that's what UBS claims is going to be the limiting factor for the pricing, where, it might be an $870 iPhone 8, and that's coming up against a $840 Galaxy S8 Plus.
Wow. I mean, the companies I think there's going to be a reckoning for consumers out there where we have to have a conversation about why I might need to spend $800-900 on a phone. I think there's always going to be a market of people who want some notion of premium, and you can satisfy that market. But I think over the next couple years, not this year specifically, but over the next couple years, that base of people who need to buy the best is going to be eroding consistently as more mid-rangers take up the slack on, well, what is it that I need to get my work done during the day? Do I need $1,000 iPhone, a $900 Galaxy, a $950 Note to get that done? Maybe I don't. And what other options do I have at my disposal for making sure I can still cover my work and do fun stuff and have a nice looking gadget all
in
at
the US
time?
At least, that's going to be coming up against financing, which is still kind of a big deal for good credit people.
Well, but even if we don't hit that $1,000 price point, you are absolutely right. We're gonna break that $40 a month over a 24-month payment plan. I think at around, what is it, $950?
And we're already talking about companies that are carriers, like T-Mobile's doing 25 payments essentially, so $30 down. They also did, the S7, I think, the S7 Edge had like $100 down payment and then $30 a month. So, there's only a limit to how much credit these entities are willing to give.
At $950, your monthly payment over 24 months would be $39.60. I think that's going to be a psychological barrier for some people. Do I want to start breaking that $40 a month payment for the phone when my cell phone bill might only be $40 or $50 a month? I don't know. Like I said, I think Apple will still do well with a premium branding because they are a lifestyle company. There is a user base for Apple products who's going to be very happy about exclusivity, that this isn't a phone that everyone can afford. But I do think this will continue to put pressure on mid-range consumers, that the iPhone SE becomes a more lucrative option, and iPhone 6S becomes a better option for staying in the Apple ecosystem and not having to spend a significant amount of money.
I do want to hit upon the imagination disputes.
Oh, yeah. We have that one last story. And again, this is also just another interesting development in Apple's portfolio. They've been doing really well with CPU design, and looks like they might be making the transition into designing their own graphics processors.
Imagination Technologies, which is the company that does Power VR, has been providing Apple with their GPUs since the iPod, had informed the press and investors that Apple has walked away from their table and is not considering things down maybe up to 2 years away. So now there's the fight for imagination to try and convince Apple that what your plans are, what your blueprints are for your own designs, as good as they are with the A11 and whatnot, they might come against our patents. That's one way of convincing them. Other ways, maybe,
Right.
or if anything falls out, then, well, Imagination's going to try and do an alternative, lower royalties, licensing deal. So there's a whole lot of loss going on here, and Imagination stock tumbled 60% on that day.
Yeah, I could bet that would be a bad hit.
So definitely a hard time trying to get the designs going on, especially when you're just IP. Then the whole thing about ideas being your trade and your products are not. It's kind of falls to the ground.
Well, and especially against a company like Apple, where, again, they've demonstrated that their shift over into designing the A-series chipsets has proven to be a smart business decision for them. So I'll be really curious to see, though, that if a company like Imagination, in looking at Apple's progress in developing their own GPUs, does have any leverage to say, like, hey, you are actually utilizing our IP here, or another company like an NVIDIA or AMD, or even in Intel and Qualcomm looking at chipset design, saying, like, this is something very similar to how we get graphics up on mobile device screens. Apple, are you sure you want to be doing that in the iPhone and not paying us licensing for that kind of chipset design? It probably kind of inevitable, but I think it's an interesting business strategy to get ahead of the negative discussion and put that word out there themselves. I just wonder what their end game is going to be for their shareholders to say, like, well, our fallback is we're going to be working on other products, working with other companies, or is this just a transition in the business that they won't be able to recover directly from? So there needs to be a market correction in their total cap.
So definitely a tough nail to bite here coming up in the next couple of years for them. And it's,
yeah, they're saying any potential iPhone 9 might be the transition point for Apple to walk away.
So I don't know if Furion does well, maybe like that may be the pinning point. But again, Apple is certainly killing it with the A series. So it's a horse race. It's a horse race.
It's and not the most exciting horse race, but one that we'll still be following on Pocketnow.
You could almost say it's the byproduct of horses as they digest food.
Huh. That is a mental image that I will let sit with our audience as we move on to a listener email. Yes, using podcast@pocketnow.com, we have a message from Colin. And Colin's asking about some battery tech with the announcement that the S8 battery degrades slower than the S7. It got me wondering, what other phones are trying to accomplish this? What other phone batteries degradation slowly? I'm not sure he meant to write it like that. This is more important as removable batteries disappear. Also, do things like fast charging really damage the battery, as some suggest? Thanks, Colin. So what do you think, Jules? Samsung was talking about the Galaxy S8, and obviously battery health is a topic that is high on Samsung's list of priorities to discuss. Are other companies addressing this sufficiently? I think one of the common practices has been the creep in battery capacity to offset loss over time. I mean, you've got Huawei out there pushing like 4,000 milliamp hour batteries in phones like the Mate 9, 3,700 milliamp hour in the P10 Plus. That seems to be sort of a common practice, putting a fatter battery in an Android phone to kind of offset that. But I haven't heard of any companies that are specifically trying to address how those batteries degrade over time.
I mean, a lot of it has to do with, I believe, the Snapdragon 835. I mean, Sony has been promoting some smart algorithms to check on, whether it should turn on the power saving mode for when you're going through the day, and it realizes some point in the day that it's not going to make it through. So just by having that turned on, you save it from going into overdrive more often than not. And
right.
It could be in how these things are carried out, as opposed to just the holistics of the battery itself or the charging technology, because when you're trying, you do have how should I word this? You do have a lot to consider when it comes to the I/O of the battery and the cell's regenerative, because it's not, batteries are not even. You go through the first cells first, and you tend to wear them out, use after use.
And unfortunately, we're not at a point where we're leveling, like, for example, trim on an SSD, where you can kind of move where you're drawing the power from to more evenly distribute load on a battery. Just isn't something that we can really do. Not to the same efficacy or the same efficiency.
So what you see Qualcomm trying to do with its algorithms is just, hey, let's deal with the usage more smartly. And, it's, we've seen with the Note 7 how far we can take just inching that little more battery into that little more, little whatever space is there. So until we find out,
we literally ran into the limits of physics as to how big a battery you can cram into how small a space. But then, I mean, to your point, like, while Qualcomm's taking a stab at this, it really does seem, and especially for Colin's question, sort of addressing more the Android ecosystem, because we know Apple has done a much better job of fronting efficiency per milliamp hour, so efficiency per capacity, I think, is still radically higher on iOS devices than it is on Android devices. That this is also the next step for Google. So when you were taking a look at the Android O developer preview, that some of the things that they'll be focusing on for developers are better management of background processes and resources, and hopefully that can take some of the strain off of the battery too. But to the second part of Colin's question, what are your thoughts on fast charging? Do we think that that these types of systems will cause batteries to degrade more over time, or have improvements in battery production helped offset fast charging systems wear on a power cell?
That I do not have an answer to. From personal experience, I say that it's just about, I mean, give and take the read errors that I sometimes got with some of my old phones, like, it would say 15 and then all of a sudden turn off.
Right. Well, and a lot of that going on in Android land too. I mean, we were seeing a number of reports on Nexus devices having issues like that, not properly registering what the charge capacity was.
Which is, scary if you think about it, especially for emergency situations. And, so it's from, I see fewer battery faults, which, of course is a good thing. But, as far as a systematic shift in how batteries are produced and, the making of them, and in terms of how the design of them, I don't know how that is, reactive to what we see in like 18 watt, 20 watt, however many watt chargers that you want to put in with Super M charge and all the charges and dash charge drink that you want to gulp down.
You want to gulp that power down. It's tough for me to speak on this because I go through a different phone, sometimes a different phone every week. So my usage is very aggressive in a very short period of time, and then I'm often sort of thrust onto another assignment to talk about a different product. So going back, I mean, if we're looking at sort of 2 years, I'm looking at phones like the V10, the Galaxy S6, and the ones that are in my keep are still performing reasonably well. Like, I wouldn't say I've seen a significant drop off in sort of the reporting of the phone reaching full capacity and how much runtime I should expect from a fully charged device. So I'm hoping that we're starting to see, because I mean, we're still seeing battery improvements are occurring every year. Manufacturers are improving the state of battery technology. Is that we're also using our devices far more aggressively over the same period of time. But the one thing I would say is I do believe, I don't have good evidence to back up my beliefs, but I do believe that a certain amount of buyer beware is always appropriate for something like charge states and battery tech. I still think that it's not unwise to look at any type of system which generates a lot of heat as something which will degrade the performance of a piece of electronics over time, especially
that's
mobile
true,
electronics.
because a lot of that heat has moved to the adapter itself. All the processing. So
whenever you have opportunities where you can charge a device over a longer period of time, and you don't need to engage in some sort of like, I need 15 minutes on the charger, can I get as much power out of this as I can? That holding on to some of your older chargers or charging off of a USB port on a computer, though, if you can let a device slow charge all night and you're not running it hot, I just think it's better for the life of the gadget in total. I mean, not even just like the battery, but for the chipset, for the screen, for the display, everything. Is the device is running cooler, you'll probably get more life out of it. But again, I don't have good data to support that hypothesis. So I think it's still up to the users. And of course, we want to hear from you folks out there listening to the podcast, watching the YouTube channel. What have been your experiences on fast charging systems, especially as we're into, probably year 2, year 3 of products which have been trying to boost how quickly you can top your battery off. Have you noticed any detriment? Have you noticed any degradation to your runtime, to your screen on time, to your processing time, things like that? Drop us a comment or shoot us an email, podcast@pocketnow.com. I kind of want to follow up on this one next week if we get some good replies from people out in our audience.
I do too, and love to see some metrics if possible, but that's what we should be doing as well. So,
well, when we try, when we check in with an after the buzz, so after 6 months, we'll try and have a chat about like, has anything fallen apart? But even 6 months isn't necessarily a long enough period of time to weigh in on the life of a gadget. So it'd be nice to get some of our viewer input on that.
After the buzz would be
after the buzz. Yeah. I wanted to do a series called EOL, like
end of life,
a full accounting of. Yeah, like to go back and like, here's the Moto X2, or here's the Moto G3, or the Galaxy S5. It's a properly not supported dead device now. How did it do? And do an accounting of like, the pros and cons of that device over multiple years. But it's tough, man, to try and produce that kind of in-depth examination. I know, like, we'd get 100 YouTube views, and it just wouldn't really be worth the amount of effort that we put into making those videos. But if we can get some support for that, maybe we'll put that on Patreon, and that'll be the 9th or 10th podcast that we come up with in this episode is Pocketnow EOL. We can make that happen,
guaranteed.
But I think it's time to wrap this show up.
Yeah,
but I think we've been talking long enough.
This podcast itself has come to an EOL.
Yes, the end of the show. Folks, another episode of the Pocketnow Weekly has come and gone. This show is over, but the conversation continues on Twitter, where you can find Jules as @PointJules, and I'm humbly @SomeGadgetGuy. Give us a follow. We love to get into conversations on social media. Pocketnow is around the web on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Google+, YouTube, and our home site, pocketnow.com. And shows like this cannot exist without your support. Sharing the weekly with your friends who love mobile technology, and dropping reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever podcast reviews can be left. We definitely appreciate all of the chatter on social media, people sending us questions and comments on podcast@pocketnow.com. And we'll get back to having some sponsors on the show coming up next week and the weeks following. But of course, there wouldn't be a show if it weren't for our listeners and subscribers who have kept us on the air since 2012. The Pocket Now Weekly will be back next week with all kinds of delicious technology goodness and archaeology discussion and science chat and food. So make sure you tune back in.